Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
Welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm Executive Director Kathleen Thompson. A political earthquake just shook Tarrant County this weekend in a special election that saw a 30-plus point swing away from Republicans to the Democrat, despite endorsements from President Trump, the Texas Lieutenant Governor, and multi-millions spent to hold what is traditionally a safe Republican seat. Today's guest knows something about flipping seats red to blue. She won a Texas House seat in 2018, also by double digits, as part of the blue wave seen as a rebuke of the first Trump administration. Representative Julie Johnson is now running for a second term in the U.S. Congress in a newly gerrymandered seat in Dallas County's redrawn 33rd Congressional District. Joining us today as an incumbent, elected, and a candidate. Welcome back to the show, Congresswoman Julie Johnson.
Oh, Kathleen, it's so great to see you again. It's so great to be with the Progress Texas family. It's great to be here.
Thank you. We're so glad you're here. Thanks for making the time. Let's start with the big win that progressives across Texas and the country are talking about, and that's Taylor Rimmett's resounding defeat of Republican Lee Wamsbaum's right next door to Dallas County in northern Tarrant County on Saturday. Will you give us your impression of what happened there and what you and fellow Democratic candidates should take from this upset victory?
Yeah, well, I thought it was fabulous. I was so excited. Been rooting Taylor on, talked to him quite a bit throughout his campaign, recorded some videos for him. So I'm just so, I can't even tell you how excited I am. You know, it's a testament, I think, to several things. When you have a great candidate who works really, really hard, has a great team, and gets the people involved. And at a time when I think it's the perfect storm really for his race, because the climate of what Republicans are doing, I think people have just had enough. They are fed up with it. And then Taylor was able to put that anxiety of the people and run a really strong campaign. And also, you know, a lot of the Democratic establishment, for lack of a better words, like I know that Texas Democratic Party was heavily involved, lots of other groups, lots of groups came in to say, you know what, Democrats, when we act with one voice, all the oars are swimming in the boat, we're all going the same way, we win.
Right.
And as opposed to working at cross purposes. And so, but it is a resounding rebuke of Republican policies. It is a resounding rebuke of Donald Trump and what the Republicans in Congress are doing. It is a resounding rebuke of Greg Abbott and how he's tried to hijack our school system in the state of Texas. It's a resounding rebuke of what Republicans are offering voters, and voters stood up in record numbers and said, hell no.
That's right. As a sitting U.S. rep, you are directly involved with the struggle to release the jet-free Epstein files. And a lot more were released on Friday, the day before the runoff election. And what striking details from that most recent release are catching your attention? And what do you consider to be the next steps on Epstein for congressional Democrats?
It is so disgusting what has happened with powerful men sexually trafficking women in huge numbers. And this thing is big because it goes to the top levels of power, not just in the United States, but across the globe. And the most powerful of the most powerful thought they had a free pass to abuse and sexually abuse a lot of women. And it's so great that it is finally coming to justice. It's tragic that these events happened at all. But House Democrats have been relentless about pursuing justice and the release of the Epstein files. You know, I'm going to call it right now. It was a dereliction of duty by Merrick Garland to not have these files out and to not bring charges during his tenure as the Attorney General. Having looked through a lot of these files and seeing what's in there, it is just morally reprehensible that it was sabotaged, that it was not released. And again, the Trump administration is doing everything they can to hold back. But what is startling to me is how implicit and Trump is, and how frequently he's referenced in all of these files. And it's very, very disturbing. And we're not done. You know, they are doing everything they can to redact Trump. They put stuff on the website, they pull it back down. we're going to still seek the full release of all the things and bring accountability for everyone. What we're seeing is, the Republicans are trying to, again, weaponize this and try to put it all at the feet of the Clintons. And everyone needs to come to bear it. We need to have everyone come and testify before Congress. Everyone needs to be pursued in this matter. And that's what we're going to seek.
The last time you were with us, Rep. Johnson, was right after Mike Johnson sent the Congress home early. He didn't want any more talk about the Epstein files. Hope springs eternal, but honestly, I would not expect a Republican from Kentucky to have joined a Democrat from California to bring the bill demanding the Department of Justice release the Epstein files, but that's what happened. You voted with them to stand with the survivors, to hold the powerful accountable for sex trafficking children and young women. Will you tell us a little bit more about this rare moment of unity?
Well, sure. What happened was it was called a discharge petition because the Speaker and Republicans on the Rules Committee were refusing to bring the Epstein files to a vote in the House. And so a discharge petition is a way for the body itself, the members, to circumvent leadership and say, no, we want this bill on the floor. We want this issue. We want to vote on it. And it requires a majority of the House, so 218 signatures. Well, we're only at 214 in the House, and we don't have that full threshold. So it definitely requires some Republican crossovers to make that vote happen. And so that is, in fact, what did happen. And so we were able to get to the 218 signature when they finally swore in Adelita Grijalva from Arizona. If you'll recall, they held up her swearing in for almost 60 days because they didn't want to have the Epstein files come out, and they did everything they could to delay her swearing in. But she was the 218th signature on that discharge petition. And then the thing that was crazy about it, Kathleen, is once it finally came to a vote of the House, all those Republicans who had been doing everything they could to stop and block the release of the Epstein files, they all voted for it because they didn't want to go down on record.
They don't want to be on the record.
Right, as having voted against it. And so it was like, 432 to 1 or something? I think only one Republican actually ended up voting against the release of the Epstein files. But they still haven't done it all. They dropped, about 1 million documents recently, and they still are millions more to go. And so this is a quest that House Democrats, that myself included, we are not going to let up the pressure. We want full justice for these victims. We want full accountability. We don't care who's involved, because this kind of activity cannot be allowed to stand, and powerful men cannot prey upon women with impunity. That is not how it should go, and we need to seek accountability and justice so that maybe these things won't ever happen again.
It appears that some Republicans, between the terrible actions of ICE and CBP and the Epstein files and on, maybe some are emerging from the spell that Donald Trump had on them for a decade now. Can you report any other significant degree of interaction with Republicans in Congress that could show any return to sanity?
Well, we saw them crack on with the Affordable Care Act as well. That got passed out of the House on a discharge petition. Additionally, I think 17 Republicans or something voted with that to restore healthcare in this country. But what we've seen in both of those instances, and this is a message that I want the Progress Texas viewership to hear. If you hear anything from this podcast today, if you take away, I want it to be this: the power of the people is unstoppable. When the people rise up, because this is what happened. People were livid about the Affordable Care Act, livid about Epstein. They flooded members of Congress. They were so involved, and we got votes passed on both of those issues, despite profound obstacles from the Speaker's office and the leadership. Again, when the people spoke, we elected Taylor Ramett to the state Senate. We broke the supermajority in the state Senate by Republicans. This election is significant because the people are furious at what the Republicans are doing in this country, namely with ICE and how they're terrorizing our immigrant communities. We saw a 50-point shift in Latino vote in the state Senate seat. in Texas.
That's right.
That's sea changing because people don't like it and they're rising up and they're realizing their participation in our politics matters. It's effective, it's important, and it moves the needle. So if you take anything away from this is please vote, be involved, let your voice be heard. It does matter.
Staying on the topic of ICE, Rev. Johnson, Trump's Department of Homeland Security is working to open a massive new immigration deportation facility in Hutchins, a town far too small to absorb such a facility, and with local leadership, Republican leadership, that has spoken out against it. Can you talk to us about what you know about that and what you personally, as a member of Congress, may plan to do about it, about human beings housed in warehouses like it's distribution center for VCRs?
Well, I definitely oppose the Hutchins expansion facility and have let that be known. You know, we are having a hearing on Homeland Security next week where the head of ICE, head of all the three branches within DHS are going to come and testify. I intend to ask about this. I think we do not need to expand, right? Because this is because they're having rogue terroristic type patrols through our cities, just rounding up people, children, grandparents, people who are not a threat to our society, people who are not criminals. I went and visited the Bluebonnet facility outside of Abilene not too long ago. And one of the things that struck me when I was there was there's 1,100 detainees there. 700 of them, 700 did not have any criminal record at all. So this isn't about rounding up our most violent criminals. I think we all agree that they should not remain in this country. If they abuse their privileges of being here and engage in violent crime, they should be deported. But that's also through a process where they've had hearings, they've had a proper adjudication of it. And that's how that works. We have a due process environment. We have the law in this country, and that needs to stand for something. And so, I definitely oppose any expansion of ICE. I intend to vote no on ICE funding. I voted no on increased ICE funding last week. I'm going to vote no again because I'm not willing to give ICE another penny under this current regime. And I also have called for Kristi Noem's impeachment because leadership starts at the top, and she's leading an agency that's terrorizing the people of this country, that's putting cruelty over compassion. And that's not who we are as a people.
Yeah, that was my next question. Where are you on the impeachment of DHS Secretary Kristi Noem?
I've co-signed, I've co-authored it. I'm on record as absolutely this is what we need to do. I've given plenty of interviews, but my name's on the line. I absolutely believe she should be impeached. I think she has absolutely violated her oath to the Constitution, to uphold the law, to preserve due process, to preserve the Fourth, Fifth Amendments, First Amendment, the right of free speech, right of protest, these warrantless searches, these warrantless engagements where they don't think they have to have a warrant to invade somebody's personal home is outrageous. That's just not the law in this country. And she's just recklessly and willy-nilly encouraging her agents to violate it, and that she needs to be impeached for that.
Staying on the topic of violating the law, along with the inspiration of Taylor Remet's win is a real sense of worry and dread for some people that Donald Trump and his party may try to again undermine an election this November. What's your take on that, serving both as a rep and as a candidate running for office on this November's ballot?
Right. Well, I'm very concerned about that. I thought it was a dereliction of duty and a breach to the people of Texas that Greg Abbott sent all the voter rolls of Texas up to the administration. That's something that people need to be raising all kinds of hell about. But I fully anticipate we'll have an election. But what they're going to try to do is kick people off the rolls and keep people from voting. And we just have to double down on an information campaign about how people can prevent about that. So one of the main ways, we had a hearing on this issue not too long ago. One of the main ways that they're using to do a voter roll purge is with the change of address forms. And so people move locations all the time. Now they think they're still registered to vote, right? Because they're still in Texas, they're still, here. They think they can still vote, or they might even still be in Dallas and they just moved from one apartment to another. but they're going to use that as a basis to invalidate their voter registration. Because they should be registered at their residence address. And so they are cross-referencing that. So, and also cross-referencing driver's license changes. So if you've done those things and you've changed your address, you need to be double vigilant about making sure that your voter registration is up to date.
Yeah, the day that we're recording this is the last day to register to vote in the March primary. So I'm sure all of our listeners have checked their voter registration status via our voter navigation website, Go Vote Texas. And please be using that if there are runoffs later from this election in the municipals, and then checking your voter registration as we get closer to November. I did see a former reporter of the Star Telegram posting a letter that she received from her Tarrant County Elections Office saying that they had information that her voter number matched the identity of someone who had passed away. And she was asked to sign a document to say that she was not deceased and send it back in.
Right.
And she was shocked.
That's right. And so death records, they're going to try to do that. But the other thing is, this primary, the time that they're going to really activate this is in the general election. I don't think we're going to see a lot of them messing with it for the primary necessarily, because they don't care who the Democratic nominee or who the Republican nominee is. All they care about is that the Republican nominee wins in November. And so we're going to have to be really vigilant. Now, you should have, if you're out there, you should have received your little voter registration card. I just got mine in the mail a few days ago. They're late getting them out. So again, they are late getting them out. So if you didn't get one, you're going to miss the deadline for this primary, but it's not, don't let them take away your vote in the general. So, we want to have to go on a very robust voter education campaign for our progressive Democratic voters to make sure that they're registered and their registration hasn't been unduly altered.
Rep. Johnson, you are in a contested primary. Early voting is just weeks away. Will you talk to us about what your number one priority is should the voters of the newly drawn 33 send you back to Congress?
It's hard to pick just one because there's several issues. But I think that the preeminent issues that are in this race that I hear from voters is healthcare, affordability, and now democracy and ICE. And what we're seeing happening in this country. Those three things are just pervasive by what the concerns are in our district. We've knocked thousands of doors. I've talked to so many voters out there, and affordability is a real thing. Trump's tariffs have made everything more expensive.
So expensive.
It's just ridiculous. I was just in the grocery store the other day, and we happened to look at just a box of diapers was $47. Well, Texas has not raised the minimum wage. And so we need a federal minimum wage increase. So that's something I have signed on to. I'm actively working on, because at $7.25 an hour, you have to work almost a whole day just to be able to buy a box of diapers. And that is just unacceptable. People cannot sustain that. Housing is another critical issue. DFW is the fastest growing metropolitan area in the country. And we have so many renters that want to be able to get into home ownership. And then we also see people squeezed with student loans and everything else and unable to do things. But I filed a bill to address at least one of these problems, which is allows you to get credit for your rent, develop a credit rating and a credit history. You cannot do that now. So you can pay let's say you have a $2,000 a month rent payment and you pay it and you're good. You paid it every time. You've never missed it. That should be Exhibit A, that you can afford a mortgage payment, that you can do it. And so my bill would allow that to happen. And then also clearly with ICE and immigration and what we're seeing in this country, we're in a real crossroads of who we are as a people and what our government stands for. I never thought in my lifetime that I would see our government execute its own citizens on the streets of this country. I never thought I would see our own government completely annihilate the rights of free speech, the rights to protest its own government, the way the Trump administration and ICE is handling it. And I think most people would never think that would ever happen here, not in the United States of America, but it is here and it's at our doorstep. And people are very, very worried about it. And I think you're seeing that with again, the results of the SD9 election and Taylor Remett's election in Fort Worth this past weekend. But we're seeing that in the outrage. Look at the streets of protests in Minnesota, the hundreds of thousands of people in sub-freezing temperatures to protest what their government is doing. People are very, very afraid. And it could be anyone. It affects everyone. It's not just Black. It's not brown. It's white. The two people in Minnesota that were executed, it is to the core of us all. And so this is an issue that's really resonating throughout the district. It's something I'm laser focused on. And there's some really clear distinctions in this race. You know, my primary opponent voted to allow mass deportations without any due process, not once, but twice. He was also one of 13 Democrats that voted to allow the federal government to punish cities who refused to cooperate with ICE. One of 13 Democrats. Who does that? Who punishes our cities who refuse to cooperate with ICE? But he voted that way. I have obviously voted the exact opposite. I've stood with all of our families. I've stood with the rule of law and due process and what's right in this country. And I hope to have everyone's support in this upcoming election.
Yeah, I just want to touch on what you were saying about how this is affecting everyone, and we're seeing protests across the country. We're also seeing protests by high schoolers because they see high school students being targeted by DHS agents in Minnesota. I mean, I was really touched by the story of the 16-year-old who was picked up, roughed up, bloodied up by ICE agents, driven to a different location, thrown out of the car, and he's 16. I have a 16-year-old. You're a mother. I mean, it's just easy for us to put our children in somebody else's shoes and see ourselves in somebody else's shoes because we're people who care about other people. And I'm pleased to see that young people are protesting. I know Abbott had some ugly tweets about it this past week, but I think that young people understand what's happening in their country and they want to right the wrong before it's too late.
100%. You're exactly right. And our young people are fired up. But, you know, another thing, Kathleen, I just want to mention to you, I filed a bill yesterday that is addressing qualified immunity. So one of the problems that we have is these agents have this high standard of qualified immunity. They can just hide with impunity behind their badge and without any accountability, without any recourse. And my bill lowers the standard. And to be able to police and hold bad law enforcement accountable while still preserving, you know, protections for the people in law enforcement that are doing the right thing. There's a balance there in the law. But where we are right now is the law just has no accountability whatsoever for these officers who are brazenly ignoring the constitutional rights and the rule of law in this country, and they need to be held accountable. And my bill does just that.
I'm so glad to hear it. This is one of my last questions. We did notice that the Dallas Morning News has endorsed one of your opponents. It was very lukewarm and buried in the fourth paragraph for one of your opponents, Colin Allred. And they said that they recommended him because, quote, he seems better equipped to address this era's poisonous mix of political cynicism and economic anxiety. And I wanted to give you a chance to respond.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Well, you know, Dallas Morning News is whatever. What I'm excited about is the over 120 endorsements that I've received in this race from the broad spectrum of the aisle. Just today, I got the Bold PAC endorsement, which is the Legislative Hispanic Caucus PAC. And the thing what I'm excited about is the people who've worked with me in the trenches. So many of my colleagues from the state legislature have endorsed me in this race. The people who've worked with us side by side in Congress have endorsed me in this race. I have the leadership. I have the Equality Caucus. I have the Women's Caucus. I have the New Dems. I have progressives. I have AOC. I have from the more conservative ideological spectrum to the most progressive of the Democratic caucus. And I think it goes to show of my broad ability to work with people, to be a good team player for the Democratic cause, to move the needle forward, and to be able to be effective for my district. And so, you know, I'm very excited about the support we have on the ground. I have endorsements from so many of our precinct chairs that overlap in this area and key community leaders and organizations. And so, you know, I'm very happy with where we are in this race. We're getting huge amounts of support and we're very excited. And so, If you're excited and want to help join our campaign, please let us know you're with us. If you want a yard sign, but most importantly, please vote. We'd love to have it.
Congresswoman Julie Johnson, we so appreciate your time today and your support of Progress Texas. Please be safe out there on the campaign trail, and we'll be keeping in touch, and we'll be watching that hearing that you just told us about this week.
Yeah, it's February 10th. So they're coming to testify in the House Homeland Security hearing on February 10th and then in the Senate on February 12th. But it's going to be some fireworks you're going to want to watch.
I'm looking forward to it. We need some accountability. It's long overdue. Our mission at Progress Texas is to improve and save Texans' lives by acting on our shared, bold, progressive values. And that starts with countering the billionaire and corporate-funded disinformation machine. While we enjoy the support of hundreds of partners, chances are that you, dear listener, haven't joined the team yet. And if you're a regular, we can get you on board right now at progresstexas.org. I'm Kathleen Thompson for Congresswoman Julie Johnson and the Progress Texas team. Thanks for listening and supporting our peerless work. Bye.